going on, everybody? I'm Dalen Flowers. Welcome to the Dalen Show. So good to have you here. I got my man Cameron Larkin from the Daily Mississippian, as well with Russ Eddins, also from the Daily Mississippian. A lot to talk about, a lot to break down, a lot to get into. I'm going to try my best not to hold them too long. We are college students. We have debt week coming up. We have things to study and do. So this ought to be fun. But Lane Kiffin to LSU is officially official. It was announced today, I guess technically per his Twitter account. I guess that was technically the official statement, I guess. I mean, it was reported throughout the day. It's been reported throughout weeks. And it was reported leading up to that moment, I guess, from players, and as well the statement about Pete Golding being at the time the interim head coach, now the permanent head coach. But Lane Kiffin has announced on his Twitter page earlier today through a thread that he has taken the LSU head coaching job. It is shown that he flew out earlier today from Oxford along with Charlie Wise Jr. And I think a few other guys within his offensive staff as well. From Ole Miss perspective, Pete Golding is the permanent head coach, not the interim coach, not just taking over this season. He is the permanent head coach for the Ole Miss Rebels football team. It is also presumably said that Joe Judge has also remained here and will help out with Ole Miss. And also a little rumor that I don't know if this is confirmed or not, but I was told Kevin Smith is reportedly staying, which may be big for Keywan Lacey, may be big for guys like Shakai Mills-Knight and other guys that have been strongly connected in the running back room for Ole Miss. So, Cameron, I'll start with you. Man, number one, this is crazy, but I guess what are your first initial reactions and thoughts just from today only? Just, what has transpired today, what went on outside the facilities here in Ole Miss, the flights out, like, what are your thoughts about today in general?
I think my general reaction after the dust settled was that in terms of transactions, I think Ole Miss in short words won. I think with finding a new head coach after someone like Lane Kiffin, you have to find someone who wants to be in Oxford and who wants to be at Ole Miss and make Ole Miss what they think it can be. And Pete Golding, I mean, had every opportunity to follow Lane Kiffin to LSU or to go to other jobs in previous years. But you found a guy who loves Ole Miss and loves what we're doing here at Ole Miss. And you secured that guy. You had the interim tag for 3 seconds, and then he's your permanent head coach. I think you hit a home run there. And I think having the defensive staff stay, obviously, I think if you're going to name Pete Golding, that was going to happen. But, there were rumors that the entire offensive staff was leaving. It doesn't seem that that's necessarily the case from videos and from reports that we're seeing. I think that in a circumstance that's never been seen in college football, I think Ole Miss walks away fairly clean. And I think that's all you could have asked for is just not rough around the edges, just the direction of the program.
Yeah. Russ, there was a lot of talk, assumingly from Lane Kiffin and Keith Carter as well, but from the media perspective, the fan perspective, whether or not Lane Kiffin should remain the coach throughout the postseason for Ole Miss. It was announced, through Lane Kiffin's statement today that he wanted to do that. He hopes to do that, but Keith Carter denied that opportunity for him. From your thoughts, Russ, did you think that was the right move from Ole Miss to not allow him to coach further after the Egg Bowl Friday? Do you think it could have been handled differently? Like, what's your thoughts on not allowing him to coach moving forward at Ole Miss as he takes the LSU job? Was it the right decision? Could it have been handled better? What's your thoughts on that moment?
Yeah, I definitely think it was the right decision. It would be kind of silly if he was allowed to coach two programs at once in a way. It just wouldn't make any sense. And I'm happy that Carter, kind of put his foot down on that and didn't let Kiffin get any leverage in that way. And, he kind of threatened to poach a lot of the staff, and the initial reports were saying that a lot of them left, maybe 4 in total, I think, which wasn't as bad as people thought. I think after the first hour, it was like everyone's gone. And then now we kind of know, I think a lot of them stayed, but I'm still kind of waiting to see more reports from that. So I think it was the right move for sure. It's kind of an easy.
We got to get this guy some better Wi-Fi.
This guy.
I just want to say it is not our fault. Russ Eddins does not have great Wi-Fi, guys. There he is. There he is.
There he is. Yeah. So I don't know what I was saying, but off the dome, I was kind of worried that if he had stayed, then he would, kind of poach some of the recruits in January. in a way, or some of the portal guys. So I'm really glad he didn't. That would just been a really bad step for the program. It's kind of the schedule's fault, though. I don't really want to say it's the schedule's fault too much because it's on Kiffin entirely, but the schedule forced everyone's hand in this way. The portal window's in a month, and it doesn't make you can't coach two teams at once to begin with, but you also can't coach a team in the playoffs and have to manage the portal for insight to that.
Yeah, the whole situation is weird because if you're Keith Carter, I think in a way that he didn't want this to go down the way that it has. I think that there was a real relationship built between Keith Carter and Lane Kiffin throughout the 6 years he was here, and Chancellor Glenn Boyce. I think that the both partners had understood that this was a dynamic time, a time that has never been seen in Ole Miss. 11-1 regular season for the first time in program history. This was 3 straight years now with at least 10 wins. A Peach Bowl appearance a few years ago, and which should have been a playoff appearance last year, but nonetheless was 10 wins. This was just a weird moment from a fan perspective, from a media perspective, in terms of Lane Kiffin seemingly had everything that he could desire at Ole Miss. He had the facilities, he had the NIL money. Keith Carter continued to give him contract extensions to raise his annual salary. He was loved in Oxford. His family had found a fitting and a great relationship in Oxford. It binds the question for me internally to ask, what more can he desire? I get, technically speaking, that LSU is a more lucrative job. They have a better history than Ole Miss. The Tiger Stadium is one of a kind, et cetera, et cetera. But when I look at the internal affairs of this situation, what's for me to say Lane Kiffin won't do the same thing to LSU? What's for me to say that if Kalen DeBoer is not successful over the next 3 or 4 years at Alabama, that Lane Kiffin won't do the exact same thing to LSU? But I look at what he said to Marty Smith as he was, I guess, in the tarmac, another tarmac situation with Lane Kiffin, that he felt like his stepping stone was complete here. He felt like he did what he needed to do. His time was complete here. And also said that Ole Miss fans should be grateful and appreciative after everything settles down. I get what he's saying. And let me also make this clear. It's been a heck of a ride. It's been a lot of fun times, some weird times, some bad times. But this has been the most successful period since Johnny Vaught for Ole Miss fans. On top of saying that, how are Ole Miss fans supposed to react after this? Were they, not supposed to be upset? Or, I think Ole Miss fans are appreciative of the moment. But when it's all said and done in terms of what's been said, the relationships he's built here, the E60 documentary that was recently a few months ago, what more did Lane Kiffin really want from you guys? Like, what more can Lane Kiffin do in his coaching carousel, in his career? What more do you think he could have wanted from Ole Miss that could have ended up, allowing him to stay here? Like, what exactly do you think Lane Kiffin was thinking in terms of making this move to LSU?
In short, I don't know. I think you hit the nail on the head. He had everything he could have ever wanted here, not just at Ole Miss, but in Oxford. Like, he was on record saying he needed Oxford and Ole Miss more than Oxford and Ole Miss needed him. He's on record too saying he got a chance to be an in-person dad watching his son play football at Oxford High, and his daughter, who I think is a senior here now, and his ex-wife moved down here. I mean, his family was back together, and that's not to say they're not going to be back together in Louisiana. But I mean, I think you hit it on the head when he had everything but the keys to the city, and give him 2 years here, and he probably would have had the keys to the city. I mean, I think what Kiffin was doing here, had he stayed, is statue worthy for a program like Ole Miss. And so when you ask, what more could he want? I don't know. I don't know what his internal motivations are. I would assume by this move, it's to win a national championship. But my question there is, if it can't be done at Ole Miss now, competing for a national championship, why is it being done now? Why are we set to host a playoff game? And I know it was under his leadership and under his direct coaching, but he was himself proving that it could be done at Ole Miss, and he jumps ship and just leaves in the middle of what could have been, it probably still will be, the greatest season in Ole Miss history. I don't understand the motivation moving from a place like Ole Miss to LSU. And like you said, the Kalen DeBoer situation with Alabama. Alabama fans are hard. They're tough on their coaches. And so say Alabama loses the SEC championship, misses out on the playoffs, and maybe they don't fire him this year. He does it again next year. Alabama fans don't stand for that. And so deep down, in my personal opinion, Alabama is the job for Lane Kiffin. And I think LSU fans would be a little beside themselves not to see that he's a program hopper at this point in his career. He's always looking for the next best thing. And until he wins a national championship somewhere, I think he's just going to keep hopping.
Yeah, I think I saw a report that was saying the reason why he left. Daily mentioned the history, and I'll get to that in a minute. But also, the high school recruiting was better down in Louisiana, I think is what I've read.
Mm-hmm.
It's better. It's stronger than it is here, which kind of makes sense. But, I think I've heard some reports. I think Saban recently on Game Day was talking about how Kiffin doesn't want to live and die by the portal anymore. He wants to, have some high school recruiting, maybe a stronger high school recruiting. And I understand that. But also, it kind of seems like now some people are saying that Golding is the reason why we have a lot of the recruits we do, a lot of the portal guys we have now. So I think Ole Miss will be fine. I ultimately, the reason why he left, I think a good part of it is the recruiting, and his whole thing is portal king. He goes down to Louisiana, maybe maintains that, but maybe he gets better recruiting too from high school. I think that's got to be on his mind. But Dalen, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned the history of the program. How much do you think that really matters to coaches? Because he mentioned that, I think in a post somewhere. I've heard that recently. Why should history matter when the only thing that matters is where you are now and where you're going? Why does it matter where you were, 5 years ago or 6 years ago?
I think it just depends on the person, man. As much as I've appreciated Lane Kiffin and what he's done for Ole Miss, I'd be wrong to say that this isn't what Lane Kiffin has done throughout his career. And this isn't who Lane Kiffin is. Lane Kiffin has always been a troll. He's always been on social media throughout the majority of his career, teasing and, making the rile out of things and, amplifying the college football world. I genuinely don't know if what he has a thought process is the same as just say John Summerall or, Pete Golding or Joe Judge. I think that Lane collectively just has a different mindset than most coaches do. And like Cameron said, he's kind of just solidified himself as being a program hopper. Again, there will be some coaches that you could have put in the shoes of Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, and you say, if John Summerall was here and he had been here since 2019 and he's had a Peach Bowl victory, a Sugar Bowl appearance, 3 straight 10-win seasons, then he is objectively sitting in that moment and understanding that I'm 11-1 right now with the chance to host a playoff game. And mind you, I'll also add, you were maybe a few plays away from Auburn, maybe defeating Alabama and going to the program's first SEC championship game. I don't know if necessarily most coaches think that way, but I think that's just the value that Lane Kiffin has. I think that that's who he is as a person. And I'm not necessarily saying anything is wrong with that. That's who Lane Kiffin is. And you love him for that, but you also hate him for that at times, whether you're a fan of these schools, you're just a college football enthusiast. I think that you look at these moments and you say, okay, Lane Kiffin thought this way and he did this. But do all coaches would do this way? I don't necessarily think that. So I think history matters for a lot of people. I think it matters for a lot of coaches. In terms of when I say that, let me make myself clear. LSU has more national championships than Ole Miss and relatively more as well. They have, competed higher in terms of the Heisman Trophy ranks. They have competed higher throughout the high school recruiting ranks throughout my lifetime and throughout the history of college football, I would assume as well. But what I think is big to notice is this. You mentioned a great point, Russ, the transfer portal. LSU had the #1 transfer portal class in the country this coming into the season with Brian Kelly. I don't know where their high school ranks were off the top of my head, but I would assume it was inside the top 10. It's not just about recruiting at LSU. Brian Kelly got there in 2022, went to the SEC championship game his first year, won 10 games his second year, and had a Heisman Trophy winner, Jaden Daniels. 2023, I still think they won 10 games, maybe 9. And then this year, it was a problem. It's engagement and it's relationships and it's the environment that you bring. There was a moment where in the E60 documentary for the Many Lives of Lane Kiffin, where I think it was Chris Lowe talking about you could be bad at USC or you can be good at LSU, but when people are disengaged, when people don't care about what you're doing at the program at all, that's when the next steps have to be taken for a coach to be fired. And I think that's what the situation was with Brian Kelly. Number one, I thought there was just a lot of toxic relationships there at LSU with Brian Kelly, but as well, fans became disengaged this year. I think they became disengaged last year, especially after the way Alabama rolled in the Death Valley last year and blew the brakes off of them. I think there was just a disengagement, and I think that's why LSU wanted Lane Kiffin. Regardless of the fact is this, LSU is a name brand. Lane Kiffin is a name brand. He's going to bring engagement. He's going to bring recruits. He's going to bring the people. He's going to bring the bright lights. And that's what LSU needs at this moment. Whether or not he goes out there and wins a national championship in his first 2 years or not, that's another story to be had. But I think the historical context of LSU, Death Valley, and Lane Kiffin's historical context is something that he saw and just I think he couldn't say no to. It's a weird situation because I will ask you two at the same time. The weirdest part about this is for me is this Ole Miss team is 11-1, man. 11-1 with a great chance to host a playoff game. And we're not talking about that. We're not talking about the 38-19 win over the Egg Bowl. We're not talking about how this team beat Oklahoma 34-26, which a lot of people are thinking Oklahoma should be in front of Ole Miss, et cetera, et cetera. We're talking about this situation, the handling of this situation, and the movement of it. Could there been anything done differently in your guys' eyes? Like, was there anything that could have been changed with this ultimatum thing talked about a few weeks ago? Like, was there anything that could have been done differently, I guess, to allow the media and the fans, I guess, solely just be enjoyed of the moment at all?
I don't think there was anything that was in place for it to be different. I do agree with Russ that the calendar is broken. This is and Lane Kiffin's known for doing things to call out broken systems. He did it with the injury system a year or two ago and called out that system. I don't think that's his motivation for going to LSU at all, but I think there's a small part of him that's like, I had to take advantage of this because of the way this calendar is set up, the way that National Signing Day and these portal windows open before the playoffs and before the conclusion of the season. I think that's a little ridiculous, and I don't think many people would disregard that fact. I do think that there was a simple decision on the table. If Lane Kiffin wanted to finish what he started and coach this team through the playoffs and potentially to a national championship, there was an option on the table and it was presented to him. And that option was stay at Ole Miss. Like we said earlier, where he had everything. I personally believe he was always going to go to LSU. Dalen, I agree with you where you said, LSU, name brand, Lane Kiffin, name brand. It feels like a match that would make sense. And with the recruiting value, I think it's just intrinsically easier to recruit in the state of Louisiana, where there's they have the fifth highest composite scores according to 24/7. The portal class without Lane Kiffin was number one. The recruiting class, again, is probably really high. I just think Lane Kiffin was always going to go. And I don't know if there was much that could have stopped in the ways of what could have been handled differently. I wish he would have, talked to the team. That might be it.
If Ole Miss beats Georgia this year, do you think he stays? If they would have had the better fourth quarter and come out of the top with that win, and they're 12-0, and they go to the championship, would he have stayed? Is that the kicker?
It's a great question.
I would hope that this monumental of a decision, like we were talking about before the show started, 16 million views, probably up to 20 million views by the time this is on his statement that he's leaving. This is the biggest storyline in college football. I would hope that something as little as losing by 8 points to one of the best programs in the country right now is the deciding factor between him staying at Ole Miss and LSU. But you never know. I guess with Lane Kiffin, you never know.
Well, maybe it wasn't the loss itself, but it was the fact that if they would have played a little bit better in that fourth quarter, they could have been in the SEC championship, and that really would have cemented themselves a little bit better, and they would have been just a little bit closer to the next tier. maybe not the loss itself, but the loss meant. The fact that, you had to beat State on the road, which is probably gonna happen no matter what. You had to have Texas beat A&M. You had to have Auburn beat Alabama. Two of those three things happened. Obviously it was rumored, or it was said that if Bama loses to Auburn, then DeBoer will be fired. He go to Penn State, and then Kiffin gets the job he really wants. That's what people were saying. I don't know if I believe that, but I wouldn't put anything past the guy for what happened today. But maybe just that one quarter, that kind of, in a way, prevented them from reaching that next step.
There you go again. It's always when you're delivering something good too.
I know.
There you go.
Yeah. I was trying to hurry up. I knew it was going to happen.
I think he still leaves because here's my thing. You look at what he's been able to do here. And I say this because a lot of the notion was you cannot win a national championship at Ole Miss. My thing is this. You can do that this year. You are on the clips of doing that this year. You cannot say that. Last year, this was the self-assembled greatest Ole Miss team of all time. You had Walter Nolan, Princely Mama Yellen come in with Jared Ivey and JJ Pegues. You've got Suntarian Perkins, Pooh Paul, Trey Amos, all these guys on defense, John Saunders. And then you got Jackson Dart back for a third year. You got Ulysses Bentley. You got you got Trey Harris coming back. You got Jordan Watkins. You bring in Juice Wells. You got Caden Prescorn, Daquan Wright. All this talent, right? And you go 9-3, you lose to Kentucky, and their only SEC win last year was on the road in Oxford. But you look at last season, and I think were the LSU, Kentucky, and Florida losses not on the staff? For whatever reason, we may never know at this point why Ulysses Bentley didn't get a single snap in the Florida game, why he had that 45-yard touchdown against LSU and didn't appear in the rest of the game. You single-handedly cannot tell me that relying on Ulysses Bentley enough would not have won at least one of those games and allowed Ole Miss to get into the playoffs last year. It was shown in the Egg Bowl last year. It was shown in the 45-yard touchdown against LSU that he can make big plays, that he can make things happen with his abilities. It was shown the season before when he was, with Quinshon Judkins, was creating a lot of big moments. He scored a touchdown against LSU in 2023. I don't understand that cause. He had the opportunities to do so here. He self-sabotaged a lot of moments last year. I necessarily don't think winning the Georgia game this year would have changed his marquee thought because he beat Georgia last year. And he had already proved that he can utilize the portal at a high enough level. He can create a staff that can compete with Kirby Smart in Georgia at the highest level. And heck, they should have won this year. There were some schematical problems defensively with what Pete Golding showed against the Georgia Bulldogs, that a few plays that could have happened, they could have beat Georgia. If, that fourth down play, I don't remember exactly the time or the quarter,
that fourth and 2.
There was a 4th and 2 play where Georgia runs the ball and it seemingly felt like Ole Miss got to stop. And then I guess he just kind of ran into one of his own teammates, bounced out and got the first down. If Ole Miss stops that play, they're in field position to go score again, and they may have taken control of that game and win. I don't necessarily think just because if they beat Georgia this year, he stays. I think this was a moment of disparity for Lane Kiffin. I think that he, in his mind, was going to go to LSU for a while, but in the back of my mind, I'll say this too. If you asked me a month ago, I would have said he was going to Florida more than LSU. I didn't think LSU was in the mix at all at that point. I didn't think that the relationship between Lane and the disparity of no athletic director, no president, and the governor being involved would have worked. I thought that he had a little bit more history at Florida. I thought that he would be able to recruit at a little bit more of a higher level than in being in the realm of Florida, especially with him knowing Florida the way he does. And of course, Steve Spurrier. So the fact that LSU kind of just swept in over the last 3 weeks after Florida fans were so prominent and so fact-worthy and so true about the LSU brand. And you cannot sit here and say it doesn't. Whether or not you're an Ole Miss fan of LSU, whoever you're a fan of, it says a lot about the LSU fan that they are in as much dysfunction that they are in. There's no worse time for a coach to go to LSU than right now. And Lane Kiffin left this 11-1 program to go do that. So I don't necessarily think Georgia the Georgia game really affected it. I think that this was just a decision that he felt like at the time he couldn't pass up on. The same thing with Tennessee when, he said, multiple times that the only job he would have left for was USC. I do believe him in saying that, and that's why he left. So I don't know if the Georgia, game only solely affects him. I think that's a great question, Russ. And it binds on to my question now. Do you think Pete Golding, can be the successor for Ole Miss that they hope he can be? Do you think he can? I will say that I know he can recruit at a high level. He did it at Alabama. He's done it here. But can you successfully run a program to the highest order in terms of NIL, transfer portal, high school rankings, and do it to the next level? Because Pete said this in fall camp. He didn't ever really want to be a head coach. He just wanted to be a defensive coordinator. Now he's put into this role, and I'm sure he's accepted it with great favor. The players seem to love him. But do you guys think, what's the next step for Pete Golding at Ole Miss? How do you see his foreseeable future looking here? And what do you think Ole Miss is able to do with Pete Golding throughout the playoffs?
I mean, I think it becomes a clearer picture when we find out exactly what his staff looks like.
Yeah.
You would presume Randall Joyner is just going to take over the DC role for now. And you, like every Ole Miss fan is assuming that Joe Judge is going to take over that OC role. But a lot also hinges on the assistants to the assistants and who all he has surrounded by him. Head coach at Ole Miss is not like an easy thing to step into now. Back in the past, old Ole Miss, like someone stepping into this job, like people would be cool, mellow. There's a lot of expectations on Pete Golding because of what Lane Kiffin built and what he has also helped build. To your point, I think he is a phenomenal recruiter. You see that with the players on the team currently that are just like, we love Pete Golding, or they're tweeting out these shark emojis. I think Ole Miss has lost a defensive recruit and a offensive recruit by the time this is going on. I just think that, like I said, it will be a clearer picture once we know the staff. But I have faith in Pete Golding. He was one of the highest paid DCs for a reason. And he's going to have minds around him that will help him in this brand new space that he's been thrust into. So I have faith in what they're doing throughout the playoffs. I have faith in I know he's not the interim, but I have faith in the interim boost. We see it all the time. A coach leaves or a coach gets fired and this team just starts performing because of the high emotions of the situation. And I'm assuming a lot of emotions going on, whether they're good or bad emotions within that locker room. And so I think, people are going to rally. The people that want to be here are going to rally behind Pete Golding, and I'm excited to see what they do.
I'll try to be quick in case my Wi-Fi cuts off 1,000th time. But I'm really curious. I have a lot of faith in Pete Golding right now, obviously. But on Tuesday, when the rankings come out, and I want to see who they have us playing, I think that's going to tell us a lot. If we're on the road in College Station, that's a lot different being on the road than being at home against Virginia. It's a lot different playing Miami or playing, Alabama, at home or something. It's very, very, very different. So I'm curious. I have a lot of faith right now. But if we're on the road against, one of those teams that, you're kind of scared of, and a lot of fans are scared of a little bit, I don't think Ole Miss is afraid of anybody. But from a fan perspective, I don't want to play them, I would be a little worried because, that it's day one of this era. I don't really know what to expect.
Yeah.
As a fan, it's a little daunting. But ultimately, Pete Golding's going to get it done one way or the other. I got faith in him. If not this year, the next year. He'll have one game, and then hopefully he's got 2 or 3 more games after this, and then he's got 10 months to figure it out the rest of the way, 8 months to figure it out until August comes around. So I got faith in him. If it's not this month, it's going to be in August. So we'll see how it goes. But it's the I think, spoiler, the title of our article coming out tonight, hopefully it's going to be the Golding era. That's my idea right now. If Clay approves that, then we'll do that. If it's too cheesy for Clay, then it's really cheesy. But
what do y'all make of like I said, the interim tag lasted -7 seconds. What do y'all make of is this because of circumstance Pete Golding has been named head coach, or was it always going to be him if Lane Kiffin left? What's going on there?
That's a great question. I think that circumstances had a part to play in it. I wholeheartedly believe that John Summerall would have been the first call for Keith Carter if given the opportunity and time to do so. But I also look at it at the perspective of I think Pete Golding can be a really good head coach. And I say that because I get it. Alabama fans really wanted him gone. He's had some miscues as a defensive coordinator at times, which all coaches do. But remember, he was under Nick Saban. He learned from Nick Saban, which is who was the greatest of all time. He has the experience and tangibles to push players to be greater. And I think that also played into the naming factor of him instead of maybe Joe Judge for Keith Carter. And I say that because those players walked out of the facility and were, talking about it's the Pete Golding era and the vibe and energy seemed really strong. And you see some players posting, Pete Golding on their pages and et cetera, et cetera. I think Pete Golding kind of exemplifies a little bit of what Ole Miss is to the T more than any other coach that they could have promoted or any other coach that they could have hired. And I think that's important to notice because he said this in fall camp too when we got to meet him that this wanted to be his last. He wanted this to be his last job. He's from Mississippi. He played at Delta State. He loves the state of Mississippi. He loves Ole Miss. I think it was also an internal understanding of they really wanted someone that they could know would be loyal and could, bleed Ole Miss, Navy, red, and blue, and powder blue. And I think that's also was a big, limiting factor for Pete Golding being promoted to the permanent head coach because he knows Oxford, he loves this place, but as well keeping a lot of the recruits that you just talked about, like Landon Barnes is still announced he's staying, Jermichael Garrett, Anthony Davis Jr. Those are all 4-star guys on the defensive side of the ball. Now the offensive side, I know a wide receiver are already decommitted and a safety as well. The offensive side obviously may be a little bit more difficult at this time and moment. I'm not saying that Ole Miss can't kind of recover in that circumstance in terms of keeping Joe Judge and kind of allowing him to assemble some of his staff as well as the playoffs goes on and the offseason gets ready to move on to as well. But I think that the internal portion of missing out on John Summerall, but as well understanding what you had in front of you with Pete Golding in terms of coaching experienced personnel, a recruiting personnel standpoint, and as well the staff that he's been able to create on defense has been really well. I mean, Randall Joyner's done a fantastic job. Wes Neighbors has done a really good job with the safeties over the last few years as well. I think that Ole Miss understood that they were put in a really weird situation in a bad bind, and they did what was best in their moments to do so to continue elevating the program, but not only just for the future, but for right now. How can you get a guy that is going to remove all the distractions that just happened over the last day and over the last couple of weeks and allow these guys to focus solely on football and understand, already have a relationship with a guy like they do with Pete Golding? This was the best move that Keith Carter Ole Miss could do. I think wholeheartedly it may essentially even be better than hiring John Summerall, even though he has experience with Ole Miss too. I think that timing mattered, yes, Cam, but I think that this is also a move that honestly they wanted to happen in a way as well.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Russ.
It was definitely the right decision to go ahead and remove the interim tag. I think it kind of solidifies and makes the whole team stronger and appear stronger on the outside. And obviously, from I think the conversation that Glenn Boyce and Carter had, the team was leaked, and I was sitting in the Domino's parking lot listening to that, and that was awesome. I was ready to go. I'm ready for the playoff game. I was listening to that. So silly thing to say, but I really enjoyed that. I think they're good. And, I think removing that interim tag was great. It's the best decision they could have made just to have some unity in a way. And I think he's going to be great. Like I said, it's now or 9 months from now.
Mm-hmm.
Ole Miss football team just released a video of Keith Carter announcing to the team that Pete Golding would be taking over. It is visible that Kevin Smith is in the room for this announcement, and a lot of the players are excited and ready for this moment. Kevin Smith is very visible in this video, so I would assume that means Kevin Smith is staying at Ole Miss and did not travel to Baton Rouge with Lane Kiffin and will not be a part of his staff. This is a good move. This is. I think that interpersonally, you were able to keep a lot of guys, and I think that speaks volumes, a lot of volumes, that Kevin Smith did not go to Baton Rouge with Lane Kiffin. And I think that speaks
Mhm.
volumes in terms of the guys that Ole Miss can still recruit in the running back room and the entire offense with Kevin Smith still here. I get it. There are a lot of problems last year with Ulysses Bentley, and there are a lot of question marks about Lane Kiffin and Charlie Wise and, Kevin Smith. But that's a huge get. That's a huge get. It really is. Kevin Smith is a great recruiter. He has passion for Ole Miss. He has experience at Ole Miss as well. That is a huge get. I will also say one more huge get for Ole Miss, if they're able to, is to keep Dante Moncrief. If
Mhm.
possible to do so, I'm sure it will happen with a lot of these, guys still staying. But he's turned around the recruiting profile since he was hired when Kevin Bolden left to LSU. So this is really big for Ole Miss. I think that this is a guy that is a player's coach. And, there are guys that are X's and O's coaches. There may be a fan coach, maybe a front office coach. But I think right now these players need a player coach, and Pete Golding fits the bill for that, which is so, so important to me because the notion was from these players walking out, Bryce Sanders said, we're going to go win a natty. I think they wholeheartedly believe that, but you have to be able to do that with the right guy at the helm. And I also think really quick, I'll say this and I'll stop yapping. I think this sends a message to the college football playoff committee. There is so much noise in terms of whether or not, okay, if Lane Kiffin goes, do they keep Ole Miss in? Does Ole Miss still host a playoff game, et cetera, et cetera? You cannot promptly look me in my eyes and keep a straight face and tell me that Ole Miss does not deserve to be in the playoffs now, that they don't deserve to host a playoff game with or without Lane Kiffin. You see Austin Simmons change his profile picture to Joe Judge, and some former players like Caden Prescore and Jordan Watkins chime in about today. This move honestly may have the players more bought in than ever before. This may amplify them and give them more energy and more determination than ever before. This team may be more locked in than they were before with Lane Kiffin based off everything that's happened. So I honestly, I'm always doing my best to look at things in the best manner and try to take the positive out of things, even when it's a very sticky situation. And I think Ole Miss has done that. And I think it's going to be really important to understand what can they do this season? That's what the big talk was. Can Lane just finish this out, because it's going to be a distraction for his players, if he's not there and they're trying to win a playoff game and et cetera, et cetera. Well, I think Heath Harder handled that to the best of his abilities today. And honestly, man, and this is just my opinion, Cam and Russ may have their different opinions, but I think that they did a fantastic job hiring Pete Golding in terms of keeping the team morale ready for a college football playoff game moving forward.
I mean, yeah, I feel like for the now, we talked about this a little bit ago. For the now and for the future, I think this was a perfect move. You need someone who's familiar with the team, so you have to name like either probably your defensive coordinator or your offensive coordinator. Obviously, Charlie Weiss is leaving. It was probably between Joe Judge and Pete Golding, but I just think that Pete Golding getting announced as head coach in Vaught Hemingway that first Friday, maybe Saturday of those playoff games is going to hit like crack. I mean, I think you see the interactions on social media right now. People are pumped up about this. I mean, like Russ was saying, I heard a little bit of the leaked speech that Pete Golding gave. I was ready to run through a brick wall.
Yeah.
I think, and to your point about Ole Miss handling this correctly, just like massive shout out to Keith Carter, athletic director here. I think everything he did, everything he was going to do with this situation was setting a precedent. This is a just never before seen circus act of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Keith Carter putting his foot down and not bending the knee to this big name that is Lane Kiffin that has done so much for your program, but to understand that for Ole Miss and for this football program, just moving on, parting ways was just the best course of action, and the swiftness with which you name Pete Golding your head coach. I don't even know if the interim tag existed, honestly. Like you hear reports of that, but that was the meeting happened and you announced Pete Golding. I mean, I think Pete Golding's the guy. I think Keith Carter handled this beautifully. I think Ole Miss comes out of this looking better for how they dealt with the situation. And I just think the Pete Golding era, it's exciting stuff. I mean, we'll see what happens come playoff time. But again, emotions are high, and a lot of those emotions are excitement that Pete Golding was named the guy.
Former Dalen Show guest Keith Carter. Big shout out to Dalen's friend, our friend at the Daily Mississippian, Keith Carter. Huge way to get it done today.
Man, this is just crazy. This is unprecedented times. Um Crazy times. Like you genuinely couldn't have told me like 3 weeks ago that this is the situation that Ole Miss would be in right now. That we would be outside the Olivia and Archie Manning practice facility, trying to figure out what was happening in that moment, who was staying, who was leaving. You couldn't have told me that Lane Kiffin was going to be getting on a plane today a few months ago to go be the head coach at LSU. There were just so many emotional moments this season. You think about the LSU game. The throw to Daquan wide open on fourth down, and the way he fist bumps the air and gets hype and celebrates with everyone. It's just crazy. It's crazy how time has transpired. Go ahead. You got something to say? Go ahead.
It's hilarious. Like you go back and you find videos of Lane Kiffin mockingly singing "Calling Baton Rouge" after
Yeah.
we beat LSU, and he's sitting there just like dancing to our band playing neck, like and the picture from years ago of him just flipping off an LSU flag. This is just crazy that all of this can happen, and yet the allure of a job like LSU, which in my opinion is always a top 3 job when it's open, no matter what. You can say what you want about the state of the program. It's in a low point, but it is always going to be a top 3 job. And this cycle, it was number 1. And who was the number 1 commodity this time around? Lane Kiffin. I think Lane Kiffin was going to leave for Florida until the LSU job opened. And he was probably going to leave for LSU unless that Alabama job opened. So it's like whoever the best job was probably going to get Lane Kiffin. But it's just a crazy time that you can mockingly, sing "Calling Baton Rouge" against one of your biggest rivals when you just beat them and act the way you do during that game with the fist pumps and the plays that you call that fourth down to Daquan Wright. I mean, after that game, you couldn't have told me that he was going to LSU. I wouldn't have listened to you.
Yeah, the press conference after the LSU win was probably the most packed I've ever seen it. I remember that pretty well, and it was full. That's a big room. It was full that day. Of course, everybody left after Kiffin spoke. Just about. Dylan, you were there. That always happens.
Yeah. I hate it for the players. I do. Not just because their coach left, but the fact that they have worked so hard this season throughout the off season. Some of these guys just got here and were recruited, I'm sure, strongly by Lane Kiffin. And then you're in the midst of something very, very historic, something that had never been done at Ole Miss, and then abruptly he's gone. And there will be some players that I'm sure will follow him to LSU. But then there will also be a collection of guys that I think will stick it out at Ole Miss for the foreseeable future. And I think that speaks volumes. It's not just that Lane Kiffin was, a great coach, but I give him this. He assembled a heck of a staff. He really did. And I think that staff bought into what they were doing here. He retained all the staff he had from last year, which is something you don't see often at all in college football. And I think that's going to benefit Ole Miss. I really do. I think that that's going to allow them to, go through some changes in some landscapes that maybe they wouldn't be as prepared for. There were a lot of different coaches changes this past offseason. So as much as a great head coach matters to players, positional coaches matter almost as if not more. Those are the guys you're in your film rooms with most of the times, and you were recruited by most of the times, and you're having more inverse topic one-on-one conversations with. Ole Miss has a great staff. Whether some of the guys are here or not, the staff that is here, they want to be here for a reason, and their job is not finished here, and they see no reason to move forward. But as well, the reports have come out that Ole Miss is going to be able to try to double some of the cash funds that Pete Golding needs to have to acquire some different staff members on this team. So, man, this should it's going to be fun. A lot more is going to, I'm sure, trickle down throughout the next couple of days and weeks, but there's no official date for it yet, but LSU will travel back to Oxford, Mississippi next year, obviously with the 9-team SEC schedule now in place. And, some of the teams that may play on the road in some schools will, come back next year, and then that'll change moving forward. But this is a game that Ole Miss and LSU are, locked into for at least the next 3 years in terms of the schedule. They're a consistent, matchup. They'll see each other every year moving forward. It's going to be weird. It's going to be a lot of intensity. It's going to be a lot of emotional things, I'm sure, said and done moving forward. Because as much as I think Lane Kiffin has talked about, even after the Egg Bowl, he doesn't like, I guess, confrontation. There was confrontation shown Friday, and there's been confrontation shown throughout his career, whether that's going up to players in the middle of a game and, talking to them, or, calling them out for, faking injuries, or whatever it is. This is a rivalry that just intensified a lot more. It was already a rivalry that was really deep for Ole Miss and LSU fans. And honestly, what's funny about this too, and then I think we're going to get ready to wrap out of here, is that a lot of LSU fans aren't even happy about how this situation has unfolded. And I'm not saying that they're not happy about getting Lane Kiffin. I'm saying they're not happy about how this situation has unfolded with Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. It's just been really ugly. And it's kind of uplifting to see the players are not, as, at least from an outside perspective. I do know some of them, but I don't know all of them. But from an outside perspective, it's not affecting them in ways that maybe it could have. So I think that's huge to know that there's growth there. In 2022, my freshman year, that growth was not there. The Lane Kiffin and Auburn speculation was very deep. And you can sit here and say that it was not because of that they lost 4 of their last 5 games. But I definitely think it had a big play to do it. They were distracted. Their mind was not fully focused on the task at hand, and which is why they lost a close game to Alabama at home that they should not have lost. That was why they lost an Egg Bowl game at home that they should not have lost. That was why they got blown out in Fayetteville, Arkansas, a game that they should not have been blown out in. And that's why they couldn't beat Texas in the Texas Bowl last year. But I think times have evolved, and I think the staff has evolved. I think this program has evolved. This isn't the stepping stone job anymore. I get Lane Kiffin had a lot to play into that, and he sure did. You're correct. You're right. But this isn't the stepping stone job anymore. This is a foundational program. This is a program that you can compete at. And I'll say this, and then I'm done. I think season ticket holders, donors, NIL people are going to buy into Pete Golding. They're going to give him whatever he needs to be successful, and whatever that takes, they're going to do that. And I think that's important. When you have a state, when you have people that want to win, that have the personnel, the money, the finances to invest whatever they need to be successful, that is when a successful program elevates to the next level. I don't mean to throw a shot at my Arkansas Razorbacks, but that is one of the main reasons what's holding Arkansas back is there are people that one of the Hogs to be successful, but they are not investing the time and money and effort to allow Arkansas to be successful. As much as you may hate that, that's what it is. That's what college football is. That's what college athletics is now. You need money to be poured into your program. You do. It's as simple a fact as that. But Ole Miss has that. I'm not worried about the future. I'm worried about it right now, and I'm so glad this is over. I want to focus on this football team. I want to focus on these players. I've wrote articles about the offensive line throughout the week. They deserve their flowers. This team deserves their flowers. This should not be the topic at hand. But Cam, Russ, any last words about today, the situation, Pete Golding, Lane Kiffin? What do you got before we head out?
I mean, just last thing. I don't think it's fair to the players at all. I think this whole season has not been about the players, and it totally should have been. This is the greatest season in college football history, and Lane Kiffin probably wants to take credit for that. This is the players, and I think it was Tyler Jordan, vice president of Realtree, that was tweeting out after some stuff happened last night and the meeting concluded, where he was like, okay, now that this is over, like, can we please focus on these players that have put us in this situation, and we'll be fine. I think, like, hearing that from someone who is with Realtree, who does a lot with Ole Miss, I just think, like, it's very grounding that, like, we can bring attention back to the players, because isn't that supposed to be what college football is about? It's gotten to these places where, and that's what college football is right now, these donors are important, but this is about the kids. Some of these kids are 18, some of them are, I don't even know how old nowadays, but it's like these are kids and young adults that we're talking about, that we're investing so much emotional stock in. And it'd be nice if we could just invest that emotional stock into the now, and invest it into these players, and not be so bent out of shape because of one man that was associated with this football team 24 hours ago. We just need to focus forward and focus on the players that are going to be playing.
Playoff coverage for the DM has been in works for about 5 weeks now, so we're ready to go, guys. Just you just wait. It's on the way. This is the week. It's kind of going to get overshadowed the next 3 days, but come Thursday, I think that's when our first article should be out for playoffs. So Dalen, I know you were a Rebel Walk, but I have to plug me and my 18 staffers plus Nate Donahue. Shout out to Nate.
I'm glad you did that, man. I have no problem with you doing that. Never would. Make sure you guys go check out the Daily Mississippian. A lot of great content. I've told them this to their face, not just because I love these two guys, but because they're putting out really great stuff this year. They're doing a fantastic job, not just with football, but with all coverage around Mississippi and throughout the world. So make sure you go check them out. I'll say one last thing, then I'm really done. I'm getting out of here. We're getting out of here. Man, I'm losing my train of thought as I said that. What was I about to say? That's what I was going to say. I think it's really, really big for me to mention this. As much as I'm an Ole Miss student, I have love for this university. It obviously this situation does suck. You know, it's weird. If it's kind of heartbreaking, and it's something that you'll never kind of forget in terms of the we are Ole Miss standard. But I'll say this from someone that wants to be a journalist and has aspirations to do this for a long time. This is a story I'll be able to cherish throughout my life, that I was able to cover all this and be in these rooms with these people this year and watch this kind of unfold the way that it has. So, man, what a day, what a few weeks, and hopefully what a few games positively for Ole Miss are left as well. So appreciate you guys for tuning in. I'm Dalen Flowers. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Make sure you give Cam and Russ a follow on all social media platforms, and as well check out the Daily Mississippian on their behalf. Great work that they're doing. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Hopefully I get to do these more. It's actually, I think, my first ever live video. But there just have never been really, I guess, a precedented time for me to do them. But it felt like no better time was to do it than right now. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Leave a like, comment your thoughts about Lane Kiffin going to LSU, about Pete Golding being hired as the permanent head coach. What's next for both programs? Would definitely love to hear what you guys are thinking. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Hope you have a great rest of your Sunday and great week. Thank you guys.